techniques that were suggested for getting the resolution passed, I realized that most of them delivered to me by accident.
Bicycles on brand new floors. Rockin'.
Okay, now let's get on with the beef with this you were explaining.
Yeah, the heart of the matter is emotions. This has to do with emotions are common between all people, maybe all life, maybe all things. And they're a way to navigate what's going on in your life and what's going on within all these systems and people and all this crazy stuff. So I got a little yin-yang here. That's a symbol. And
Yeah, little yin yang. Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to show this picture too. It's sort of a joke, but it says, "Come to the dark side, we have weed." What
Okay.
the message is that everything that is supposedly dark might not be black, and everything that's supposedly light might not be white. So
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good point, because just because you've got dark energy, it doesn't make it bad.
yeah, and so when somebody tells you they're helping you out, you need to look to your emotions and see if they actually are helping you out. Are they helping you to live a healthier life? Are they helping you to build community and relationships? These are the types of things that show the depth of reality. When something's true, it has a higher resolution than something that's been constructed and construed, because something that's true hits us on deep emotional levels. And these emotional levels are communicative, and we share them as humans. We might have a different belief system, but the emotional experience may be similar. And so where this leads us is, we talked about hypnosis. That's coherent linear thought. The almost esoteric aspect of hypnosis is coherent linear emotion. And that is the gateway to navigate the aethers, or the hyperspace, and how to navigate with these entities and to communicate with them and to be in their presence and not to be traumatized with them. Because if you're panic and you're full of fear, they're being channeled through your consciousness, and they're feeding off that fear. And so they manifest more and more through the emotions that you give them. So
you're actually saying that these entities that people are seeing and perceiving are actually real things in the thought domain.
yeah, and through us and through our emotions, they gain physical substance. And then we can see them as groups, like multiple people could say, "Oh, there's the UFO."
As opposed to one person seeing
as
the
opposed
UFO
to
and nobody
one
else in
person
100
seeing it.
it.
Yeah. And so this is the secret. If you practice coherent linear emotions, this is something I experienced in a vision of ancient Egypt. The school of magic, we call it magic now, but what the magic is it's a set of symbols that represent deeper emotions and deeper archetypes within you. And by using the symbols to sort of create a story, you're creating a story of the emotions. And the linear amount of emotions creates a force that what's inside of yourself, the inner world and the outer world, become one. And you can control the external world by creating an emotional gateway. And so this has a lot to do with programming and stuff. A paper I want to mention is Dr. Richard Alan Miller. He published a paper called The Holographic Concept of Reality. And we'll give access to this paper. This one's key because once Dr. Richard Alan Miller, published it, the spooks came and confiscated all his notes. Because this is telling you that...
Who confiscated all his notes exactly? Was it
I think it's
FDA or some people?
He was in Navy intelligence, and it must have been his superiors in Navy that confiscated it all, and he rewrote the paper from memory. What he's saying in this is that our experience of the physical or our experience of the psychological or the emotional is an experience of the same hologram, just in different amounts of resolution. And
now, resolution seems to be very important here. In terms, and that means you're able to cognitize more detail based on some kind of mind mapping, or
yeah, because when you understand how the emotions are working, if someone's saying something to you, you can tell how the effects that are coming out of it. You can intuit how someone's functioning based on what they're saying. You might have different belief systems and interpretations, but if you're aligned emotionally and you're creating community, that's how you navigate when somebody's trying to destroy you, or when you're trying to like reprocess trauma and be healthy. When you stay in a really cognitive state where you're trying to manage yourself, you're always trying to manage your symptoms, you don't descend deeper into the elements and re-experience sort of this portal of the trauma that happened to you as a child. This is sort of the open door that's causing all these entities to come in.
see, this is quite interesting, because one of the people that we interviewed, he's now in another country, and she was referring to when she goes down to the basement where she's staying in her friend's house, that she's going into some kind of state where she's encountering all these beings. Because this is her awakened consciousness she's dealing with. But is that a good thing that she's doing, or a bad thing?
Well, it's never good to go into that state and traumatize yourself, which can often happen because it can be overwhelming. You can get sucked into that state if you don't have somebody to pull you out and say, they're not physically here and we're okay, we're physically safe. You can be in that state and you're in it's almost like a state of timelessness. Time it's outside of the dimension of time, so it can be very traumatizing if you are fearful of these entities, or if you're panicking. They're going to feed off that panic, and more of them are going to come and have a good old time with you.
Now, this is something which I was mentioning off camera in Egypt, when these two girls were taken for a ritual, and one of them was very, very fearful and very traumatized and crying all the time, and then they were brought to a pillar where they weren't actually strapped to the pillar, but they could break free if they wanted to. And the point is, one of them, when these beings, or these alleged humans, shape-shifted into some kind of other beings, the girl who held her cool was able to simply break free and almost walk away unhindered, because these other beings didn't even bother going after her. It wasn't as if she was, and she got away. But the other girl who was crying and screaming and whatever, I don't know what happened to her. But
yeah, they get more substance by her emotions and her gait. She's the one that's channeling them into this dimension and creating that bridge. And how this happens, this is another paper I want to just show. We'll give access to this one. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake sent me this paper earlier this week. This is the only clinical study between guts, which is your lower brain almost, just because of the amount.
They have suggested that the lower gut has an actual brain. There's a membrane there which is out.
And so what this research project showed is that if I'm sitting in this room and then you and Janine go into like 10 blocks down the road, and then if I'm sitting here and you channel hatred towards me, my gut, and you can read this on the measurement, the gut signal between the gut and the brain will start going up like crazy. So you projecting hatred at me has an emotional and psychic link between my physical body. If you project love at me, you can see the excitement of the nerve pulses between the gut and the brain go up as well. If you just project normalness, like no neutral emotion, The gut is just the same. So what does this show? It shows that this is a dimension outside of space-time that has access to your higher self. And it has a link to all other life. So you need to be aware that if you are allowing other people's emotions to come flooding into you, it can have access to your spirit. And this is something that's proven in the science paper. And it's an explanation of the gut intuition feeling and your sense of being outside of time.
Is this Miller's paper?
This is published by...
Sheldrake's paper?
No, Sheldrake emailed me this. I was just talking to him about what would be the effects between psychic abilities with someone who had a piece of their gut removed and someone who just had a normal gut, which is an experiment that we're going to be looking at into the future.
Is there what particular part of the of your stomach or?
I think it's in the intestines, where the intestines meet is a really sensitive portion for psychics. And people who are really sensitive to emotions and to psychic spheres, they have sensitive stomachs and digestions. They have sensitive ears, and their sinuses are really sensitive. They're sensitive to germs and to food and allergens. It's because they're in tune with a lot more than just the meat and potatoes of the here and now. And so, by being aware of your emotions, you can navigate these planes.
And that is why the fear elimination program is so important. So you have to somehow control your fears before you go into these states, so you don't feed these entities in the first place.
Yeah, and so that they don't continually re-traumatize you. And
which is a very important thing about when we're investigating people who have been traumatized, that you don't simply re-traumatize them in the for the sake of getting their story
out. And this is very important for children who report encountering entities or elves or aliens or fairies. They need to be very carefully looked after, because like we talked about before, the system will prey on this as if it's mental illness, and they'll give them medications to shut this down and to damage on the one hand, people can, because of their belief system, they can get totally lost in this sphere. They have no idea what's happening. They have no conception to see. And their mommy and daddy tell them it's just make-believe, right?
Yeah.
But they know that this is deeper because they feel the emotions, and the emotions are real, right? And so little children need to be protected and respected and given confidence so that they can exist in these domains and develop their abilities without having the need to convince the world that they're real or not. It shouldn't matter to people who don't believe, who have never experienced this stuff, whether they believe or not.
I think that's very important to get across, that you don't need to try and convince mommy or daddy or somebody else that this thing's real. It's real to you, it's happening. So just leave it at that.
Yeah, and all the recommendations I can give is just that to follow your emotions and go for not necessarily the light emotions, like quote unquote what's supposedly like organized religion, maybe not so good for you. I read a paper on childhood epilepsies, and it's in a paper from Islamic Muslims, and they wrote about how the seizures of childhood that are not caused by brain damage, which is it's a big thing. They're saying that it's caused by jinn infestations.
Yeah.
So they will talk about in their medical journals the spiritual dimensions, like openly about it.
Right.
But here, you won't get any of that explanation, and the child will feel totally misunderstood and if they talk to their teachers or their doctors, they're not the ones that are going to have the answers. You need to find people in your life that listen to you, what you say, and respect you for how you say it, and aren't looking to try to advance their knowledge by preying on your abilities or secrets. You need people who respect you for who you are and want to see you grow in your abilities. This is the opposite of the type of person who is afraid of these abilities, who, when their child has psychic abilities and they notice them, they think something's wrong, or their programming in their mind tells them that this isn't good.
It's the work of the devil, or
it's the work of the devil, and that their child needs to be demon exorcised. And this is very hurtful for kids, and this is how the trauma cycle forms. And they're saying, when you say that I'm the one that's damaged and I'm not okay, that's going to always be pathologically based, and it's going to continually feed into the system that you're always going to be trying to be managing yourself, but it's always going to be on the surface level because the trauma is still down in there, because people aren't recognizing your emotional experience as real. When they say that it's fake and false in a fairy tale, it creates a wall, and that part of you has just split off. And that's how you have investigated a lot, how people's abilities are kept in a little box and utilized for very specific purposes, and when the connection between that box and the rest of the personality connect finally, then the person goes manic and they have a lot of, I would say, mental health issues. We don't get to talk about this as much. You hear the word mind control talked about a lot more than mental health, which I believe it's going on, but it's when you say the word mind control, that's the pathological description. Mental health is supposed to be a healthy, positive thing, but that's been misconstrued to mean that you're crazy. So striving for mental health is not even something that people would try to do. What they're trying to do is make cognitive sense out of it, which is not going to be able to do it, because your belief system is creating your reality. So it's going to be different between the different people. So what you want to do is go to the deeper level of your emotions and settle your emotions. So from there you can go and start to manifest your purpose, rather than constantly trying to protect yourself from outside invaders. You need to accept that they're all inside of yourself and they have gateways to you, and that you need to be present with them.
What do you mean by need to be present with them? How do you mean that?
If you see a ghost and you fear it and you try to push him away, he's just going to get more substance. If you're able to accept his reality and acknowledge him, acknowledge maybe that he's trying to scare you, or maybe he's just trying to make a friend. You don't know what they're trying to do unless you communicate with them.
So does communicating with them, though, mean that you're giving them more power, more energy? So how does that
Well, that's
work?
a good question. If you are following what as if giving away all your power to them, like lots of times the first times people have metaphysical experiences, they're so surprised that it's happening that they give way to becoming a total passive observer, which is then they're just going to do what they want to do. But when you acknowledge that you have just as much power as they do, then you can have a conversation, and if they ask you to traumatize yourself, you can say, no, I don't want to do that. And if they say, I want to bless you, you can say, yes, I'll have some more of your blessings, of course. So it gives you an emotional way to navigate, rather than this species is bad and this one is good and this church is good and that church is bad.
All angels are good, all demons are bad. Or all reptilian aliens are bad, or whatever.
Once you've bought into that, then you've gone down the physical path, that this physical entity is good or bad. you need to be in touch with your deeper emotions, which is troubling because once you've been traumatized, what's hiding inside of you is pain, and you need to feel that pain and to experience it, and that's the way to process it and to move on and to understand yourself better.
You mentioned this thing about some kind of entity at the back of the neck, some kind of octopus thing. Is it related to this?
I don't know much about it, but I'll give the story of that vision. In hypnosis, in a delta wave, you have the ability to consciously be present within another life. And so I watched a few minutes of James Casbolt's first video. I don't think I really understood it, and I moved on, but later that night I had, in a deep state of hypnosis, which I put myself into, which I do regularly with HemiSync. It's a brain entrainment to put your brain into theta wave. My mind immediately locked onto the target, or as you would say, I was triggered, of being a little clone person inside of a glass, and being in the water of this glass giant test tube thing. And I was this little being in there with big round eyes, and he was cute, but he was developing in that tube. And part of his development was outside of the tube, it was almost as if they're your tutors, which is 3 gray aliens, or what would appear to be little gray people. One of them was in charge of programming or advancing your sense of sight and hearing, and one was in charge of advancing the sense of taste and smell, and one was advancing the state of your mind and your spirit and your soul. So these are your 3 tutors, and inside the jar, hooking up to your back brain, was this octopus, black octopus thing, hooking up to this little guy's back brain in the water. And so this is a vision I had in theta state of like what they call a past life, or a glimpse into another conscious being. Well, like a past, when hypnosis is all about going from beta, you close your eyes, then you go into alpha, and then deeper into delta. When you're in delta state, you get visions of being other people that people call their past life visions. Sometimes you get a hypnosis session where it's targeted for you to have a vision. Sometimes the vision is spontaneous.
Yeah.
My vision was spontaneous.
Does that make it special?
It means your subconscious mind is locking onto the target, and the information is streaming in, rather than your cognitive mind creating the story as you go along. The information is downloading instead, and you're witnessing it unfold almost.
Right. This is very, very good stuff.
What's interesting is that this guy, he wasn't exactly human, because when he left the jar, he couldn't breathe properly, the atmosphere, and when he left and went out into the cities, he couldn't breathe properly, and he was called back to return back and develop more, and called back to his makers almost.
Was this at the base?
Yeah, I think it was a base underground. Before I had this vision of sorts, I didn't know anything about the underground bases that Barry King talks about.
Now, I have to say this
people.
before, I hope I'm not interrupting too much all the time.
Yeah.
Do you think that is real, or it's a load of fantasy?
Based of what I saw, I would think it's probably there is living little people.
It's which?
I think they are doing that. I don't know if it's here.
Do you have any idea where that base was?
I don't have any idea.
Is there anything in the base of the dream which indicates numbers or types or locations or
That's
even a floor
question.
level? Or
I feel like it was underground, and I feel like there was multiple people or beings being developed there, and there
what
was
sort of scale are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think it was quite big. Like the hall, like all I saw was out of this being's eyes, and most of it was from his perspective in this jar, or this test tube giant vat thing.
How many other vats were there? Or where?
Like there's one here, and then there's one there, and they were like rows, dum 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 dum. And I was just here, seeing out of this one vat, and there was one more prominent. I don't know if he was a gray, but it was sort of a weird looking, more prominent being who was
Did it have
sort
a
of
ridge,
like a
thick ridge down the middle, or?
I don't know. There's this show called Reboot it's like a 3D animated show from Canada, and there's this little guy in that. I think he's Oriental, but it's this robot sort of creature. Yeah, the more prominent guy, he was sort of like the fatherly figure almost, that had the wisdom almost that this little guy wanted to learn from.
So you're talking about the grey on the outside?
Yeah, he's like the little greys. There was 3 of them that were smaller.
Yeah.
This guy was a
with
little.
almond eyes.
Yeah, the greys had almond eyes. The kid in the vat had big round eyes like a Bratz doll.
And this is after you being triggered by the James Casbolt, first few minutes of James Casbolt Basis 4.
Yeah, it was. And it was in a deep state of hypnosis. And I'm very familiar with past life visions because I've had a lot of them. It was not a guided meditation. It was spontaneous. And afterwards, I watched some more of the bases. This was quite a while afterwards, I think. But I eventually stumbled upon Barry King, and his drawings were quite similar to what I had seen.
Okay, I'm Barry King. I'm a UFO researcher. I've been researching the subject for 30 years now. Over the last 2 years, I've been producing some documents called The Voice. This details an NSA-run mass mind manipulation program in this country. This program also involves microchipping individuals, genetic engineering and experimentation, and is run from a base deep in the Berkshire countryside. I've been involved with this program for a number of years now. In fact, I was first inducted in 1972. I worked at the base, which is located underground at Peasmore in Berkshire, as a security officer.
What sort of duties did that include?
The main duties as a security officer then were to patrol the premises. You're overseeing goods in and out. Goods I use in a loose term because obviously we're not going to know what sort of goods they're going to be. Basically, all the usual security operations.
What size of base is this?
Well, when I was there, the complex itself was approximately 450 yards by 650 yards. But obviously, since then, it's probably doubled in size.
And how many levels?
6 levels. They were the main levels.
And how far would they be down underground?
The deepest point would have been about a mile. I only had access to a certain amount of information, so I only know about those 6 levels. The only grey, now if we use the term grey as an alien being, was those that actually were around the base at the time.
Right.
At the
So
base,
how many are you talking about greys at Peasmore then?
I've only seen 2 greys at Peasmore.
Yeah, the programmable, the PGLFs.
The PGLFs, so...
And how many of them are there, and what sort of quantity are we dealing with?
I would imagine hundreds. I mean, of each.
So how many
they're
did
in
you
3
see?
stages.
Right.
The tiny fetus-like stage 1s.
And how are they generated?
The actual mechanics behind that, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, as a
So
security
what
guard,
did you see as such?
they're in like racks or pods, if you like.
Yeah.
And there's row upon row of each of the 3 stages. Stage 2 and 3 use the same type of large rack,
Yeah.
and they're in certain pods. And there's obviously row and row and row on each level.
What sort of size of container are we dealing with?
The larger racks are about 40 foot long, 6 foot by 4 foot or thereabouts.
Is this in some kind of a clinical ward or factory type environment? Or?
Oh no, well, no, it's more like a warehouse. I mean, literally they are stores. They call them the racks, the sheds.
Yeah.
And that's, row after row, these things are just stored there for use.
These things are alive, obviously, but they're in a sleep state, or? I mean, you mentioned before that you could actually walk up to them and you'd see an expression on them. Was that the human ones?
Because they're programmed directly from the central computer systems, literally anything that goes in, they're programmed to go and do. They haven't literally minds of their own as such, but you can get something out of them. I mean...
In what way?
Well, it was a bit of a standing joke between the 4 British security guards there, that there was something strange about the faces of these little creatures. And 2 of them were joking one afternoon and saying, well look, you get a screwdriver and you just carefully prise off this black thing on his face.
Right, so you can walk up to them and you can touch them.
Well, you can pick one up, literally shove it over your shoulder. They're so small and light, but very, very strong. They are very, very strong and very... you could literally, go and pick one up.
So there's sort of a stupor, a coma type status?
Stupor. Not a coma, because literally once the programming starts, whoosh, off they go and do whatever they've got to go and do, what they've been programmed to do. So I don't really know how you can describe the state they're in. They're just suddenly like automatons, they're switched on and off.
I mean, that implies that you actually were somehow in the Peasmore base.
Yeah, I don't know if it was at Peasmore, but yeah.
Because those drawings are of the Peasmore base.
Okay.
But I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Those are hand drawings done by Barry King of the AL499 Peasmore base.
And like I said off camera, it's when you have a word that you've forgotten and it's right there, your mind is psychically connected. Or when you're remote viewing, your cognitive mind doesn't have the information, but your subconscious mind is locked on like a target. And this seems to be what has happened. And I was not that surprised to hear Miles say that other people have been triggered. Although I don't know anything about that. I've only heard you mention it offhand.
But it seems that James Casbolt's statement, or James Casbolt has got an awful lot of people connected to him in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who doesn't have any evidence, this is very important that we have very little evidence. I don't think we have any actual evidence of any of this actually happening. It's all in hearsay and dream states and accounts. But you're actually saying that you watched some of Casbolt and then you had this dream.
Yeah, it wasn't a dream, but it was a vision, delta state vision. The thing is, how do you incorporate this vision into your belief system? Is that to say that I grew up as a clone from the Peasmore base?
Well, it is interesting.
Perhaps.
But it is interesting that you did say, when you introduced yourself at the very start, that you said, "I am a human being."
Yeah.
Everybody would have expected that to start with, but why did you want to make that distinction to make sure?
Well, I could come to the conclusion. The last time I was in London, I think I was 1. I came here at 1 and age 3.
Yeah.
This is my fatherland. My father is from here, and all his fathers, and so on. So I could create a narrative about myself that would incorporate me being a clone from a vat that escaped at a young age, and my parents took me from this base and never told me. But it seems like maybe something else is going on here, and it's not necessarily me physically that was there. It's more of a spiritual connection that I am suggesting. And I have perhaps a similar emotional or even spiritual connection to this being that connects us and that gave me access to seeing through his eyes. So I might suggest if you have a vision that you're a soldier, it perhaps was you in a past life, or maybe it was you in the aethers doing an etheric operation, or maybe you're seeing somebody else's operation, or maybe you're just imagined it. All of these are possibilities. It's how you value yourself and how you create a personality and a narrative for yourself that allows you to function in this world, that everybody else doesn't think you're crazy, but allows you to harness your abilities. That's what's important. And
I think that's very important for a lot of the witnesses. For instance, I know there's one particular woman who's been abducted many times, probably one of Britain's most abducted. And she's managed to overcome this by equating it on an ordinary level and just get on with her life. And she almost prefers to be with the so-called ETs.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in that dream which you've got any other information about, details about what the base was like, or any insignia or numbers you saw anywhere?
They had those hazmat suit sort of things, so some of these beings, when they come out and they're not developed enough, they wear one of those suits with a big mask and like a hazmat suit, so that inside the suit they can kind of go out of their jar a little bit and walk around.
This is before their lungs can develop properly, or they haven't been.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Or maybe the oxygen isn't the right type for them. But
you're mentioning one that couldn't breathe properly, and it couldn't.
Yeah, the one that I experienced, he left his jar and he went out into the world. He couldn't breathe properly, so he wanted to return to the more prominent gray to get more of the story or the information of how he can live better and how he can
But by that time
function.
he must be a human. I mean, is he
Yeah,
an outward feeling of an outward look of being a human being?
I think so, because he went out into the city, but the desire was to go back to people who knew what was going on, and so that he can meet his makers and know how to function properly.
Do you have any idea where this happened?
I don't know.
What's your basic feeling about Casbolt and your basic feeling about Barry King in these stories?
That's a good question. I know James Casbolt was involved with some of the breakup of Project Camelot. Not so much him specifically, but I think he was involved with that, with Heather material and another witness.
The Heather material?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it was James who wrote about Dr. Green.
Yeah, Dr. Green's in there, who's meant to be one of the German scientists. Dr. Green's meant to be, I think, Mengele, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the witnesses that I interviewed, Dave Marrow, was on the phone. He was talking about reconnecting with Mengele, with Dr. Green. This is only a few weeks ago.
And so I wonder why people are so offended by some of the things he says. I don't take offense to him, because whether what he says is real or not, it doesn't challenge my perspectives. I do see how he is functioning within the communities, and he's being banned, and people are just arguing against him.
Yeah, I mean, you're specifically, I think, referring to some of the more recent stuff where he talks about the Jews and the Nazis and these races and reptilian shapeshifters and stuff.
Yeah. And I don't think it's about so much about asking him if what he's saying is real or not. It's about asking him if it was real for him. From his experience, things, maybe he's experiencing things a lot differently than we would think.
Well, there's even people saying he's different. The person who was at the David Icke, not the David Icke, the Project Camelot Super Soldier Summit interview with Max Spears and James Casbolt. The James Casbolt there was a different one that I interviewed only a few weeks later.
And so we have to go back to the deeper elements of emotions, because I can't prove or disprove anything he says, and he can't prove or disprove anything that I say. It's just different people's experiences. And what's important, though, is how we work together. And if my belief system is threatened by what he's saying, then perhaps the claims that he has been programmed and that the function of his coming out into the community is to cause infighting is potentially true, because that's the effects it is having.
Well, he's coming up with lots of different things which are going to have people arguing. That's certainly the case. I mean, mostly, is it true? What he's saying real or what? Mm-hmm. But he does seem to be targeting to specific demographics, so to specific people. He will trigger people.
Oh, yeah.
And the answer, what I'm trying to find out is what's he doing? Is he just basically being put out in the community to do the triggering?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say if he has been put out or not. I don't know anything about that. But what I can say is people who have been traumatized as children, they do have these channels to the deeper selves and the deeper abilities, and in remote viewing, it's the person who's auditing your session who chooses the target. So if he has a target that's real, we're talking about the deep dimension being true, but he's talking about things that might not cognitively make total coherent sense when they're validated. He's going to be triggering people because that's a hypnotic induction. You have a little bird right here, while there's a deep subconscious message coming through. That's hypnosis.
I think that's a lot of what James is doing. He's sort of talking at right angles to people. Mm-hmm. So this meaning here is not the one that you want to look at. You want to look at this meaning.
Yeah, and that's a powerful hypnotic induction, because the conscious mind can't make sense of it, but the unconscious mind can make perfect sense of it, and it gets a deep, direct channel to what he's, because of the trauma and stuff from people, it can expose it to you with your experiences with them, because they're very awake to that. So it's a technique of sorts. It's a way to access.
What do you mean it's a technique of sorts? What type of technique? Is it part of the MK Ultra thing or Monarch thing? Or?
I don't know. I don't know anything but what I've heard from other people about that, but I do know that a lot of hypnosis came out of those programs, our understanding of how hypnosis works. And that's called, that's all of hypnosis, is that technique. You set up a little bird that's chirping, and then while the cognitive mind up here is watching the bird, the subconscious and the emotional channels are directed at something very specific. So your cognitive mind can't make sense of it, but you do get a spiritual connection. So it's important to have a holistic view of what's going on so that because the experiences, I would say, are real on a deeper level, but through a cognitive perspective, they don't make sense. And so when you explain them to people, they're just going to tell you you're crazy.
Yeah.
And they're just going to argue with you and say, I've been investigating UFOs my whole life, and what you're saying doesn't fit exactly perfectly into the system.
Well, there's some people just don't take that this whole story about this so-called...
And it's unfortunate when we push him out of the community, because that's not what he needs. He needs to be accepted into the community and listened to and integrated into the community and say, what you're saying does have value because you obviously have these abilities to access a deep theta state and the spiritual dimensions that go along with it.
I mean, this, you think, should be applied to all the abductees and contactees, because they're having, they should be treasured and integrated into society.
Mm-hmm. And that was the role of the shaman in old cultures, that
Yes.
they would be seen at a young age, and they would be taken up and raised by people who knew how to raise them in whatever tradition
Yes.
and system of symbols and metaphors that you want to use. But what's happening, according to the witnesses, is that they're getting sucked into military programs who are doing...
Well, that's what the MyLabs are. The MyLabs seem to be there to take these people and do whatever.
And so if that's what's happening, their belief system is going to be structured in ways that don't allow them to get peace in their life, because the peace would mean that this theta channel would settle out, and maybe they want to just live peacefully and not necessarily perpetuate this trauma. But trauma's an effective route to theta state, but it's not a necessary one. You can develop these abilities beyond the trauma. But the children who have been exposed to that kind of stuff are very special, because that impacts how they develop into an adult, and that development is very special and is a very powerful asset. And yeah, we need to take care of these people and not have them trying to desperately create a narrative that makes sense of all this crazy stuff in their life, so that the trauma and destruction in their life will have meaning to them. That's what they want, is a narrative that makes sense of all of this.
Is it possible to have a narrative that makes sense? Because it's all so crazy, the whole thing is.
I think it is possible to have a narrative, but when the narrative is created by a patchwork, when you take a little bit from A and B and C and D and E and F and sew them all together and create a quilt work, you maybe haven't critically analyzed that people are experiencing things differently. So what you want to do is see what's true for you almost, and create your own perspective on it.
How do you actually see what's true for you? I mean, as opposed to going after some sort of imagined path which is not really true, or just imagination. I mean,
that's true. A good place to start is just, what do you want in your life? Do you want to develop into a nice person, and do you want to live a life and do good things in your life, or do you want to be constantly being traumatized and constantly experiencing these metaphysical ideas that don't make any sense to you?
I mean, are you saying this applies to all abductees, that they're conscious, they could switch it off, they could stop it?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it's as easy as just asking you to stop, but I am...
Is it by taking ownership of your own life and...
and saying that I want to develop, and the experiences that happened have meaning for me and value for me, no matter what anybody else says or tells me, whether they believe it or not. And going from there and saying that I don't have to be limited by one belief system or interpretation of what happens, but I do have to acknowledge that The world is a lot more beautiful and amazing, and we have amazing abilities that are not accepted by mainstream.
Well, we're specifically persecuted by mainstream.
Yeah, you're told that if you do have those, that there's something wrong with you.
So the main thing is that they're perfectly natural, it's fine, and it's okay, but you don't have to tell everybody that you're doing it.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is I would recommend having a teacher who's not looking to... Well, there's two schools of shaman. There's the sorcerers, and then there's the healer shaman.
Yeah.
The sorcerers will utilize your knowledge and experiences and your abilities for power and for control. That could be positive or it could be negative. We've all heard that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the path of the warrior shaman, waging war and waging battles, you're always going to be doing this.
Yeah.
The other path of the shaman is the adventurer shaman, who isn't necessarily limited by his belief system, but he uses them to benefit himself, to emotionally charge himself up, to heal, and to create community. And you can tell that this is happening when people want to be around you because they are positively emotionally affected by you. Not that you have to be like the secret and always just talk positive, when the truth is the world is pretty negative a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of horrible shit going on. You don't have to put your blinders on. You have to see those, but you don't have to accept that the whole world is rotten. You have to accept the positivity and the purpose and the value. And that perhaps comes from accepting your purpose in life. A lot of people are like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Yeah. They're lost in cognitive, what am I supposed to do? But when you feel that you're creating community and the positive dimensions, and when that's of value to you, then that's when your purpose starts to unfold, because the universe will almost allow your life to happen, how it'll unfold more, and that's synchronicities, when your spirit isn't in line with what's happening in the universe.
Okay, we've got a number of ET species you want to discuss.
Yeah.
Now, are these real ET species, or imagined, or are they in the outer dimensional realms, or what? Where do we find them?
Well, these ones are physical, biological creatures that have been retrieved and been tested on. In our past discussions, we've been talking about the psychic dimensions. And it seems like it has a multi-components between the psychic sphere, where these guys usually like to hang out, and the physical sphere, where once in a while, maybe once in a lifetime, you'll see a physical UFO hurtling by. Mostly you encounter them in the psychic sphere. But when you do encounter them in the physical sphere, they are really cute looking. So the first one is, his name's Atta. He was from the Atacama Desert. He was retrieved from a little metal egg. And he's about yay high. He was about 7 or 8 when he died. He has different numbers of facial bones and rib numbers than humans.
And this is the one that was in the Sirius movie with Steve Grimm.
Yes, it was. And it was DNA tested at Stanford using a human approach, and it revealed it was about 92 to 94% human, whereas a chimpanzee is about 96 to 97. A Neanderthal is 99.5. So this guy's a more distant relative to us, but he's humanoid. He's definitely related to us. And he was living on Earth at the time when we were a couple hundred years ago, probably. The second one, his brother or sister, was this little guy, looks very similar. This was retrieved in Russia by a woman from a similar metal egg craft, and he was retrieved alive, but she tried to keep him alive, but he died in captivity. She photographed him and took lots of pictures, but unfortunately the KGB came and took him away.
Well, we are very confident that that sort of thing has never happened in this country, and certainly has never happened with researchers in the Lake District, for instance, and it certainly never happened with people in the Republic of Ireland who took lots of photographs. So those nasty Russian people are bad. Obviously, this kind of thing would never happen in Britain.
Yeah, and it throws a monkey into the wrench of the conception that these are just archetypes that you are imagining. Maybe they are, but maybe they can manifest into our reality, our physical reality. So another case study to look at is over the dome in Jerusalem. There's a nice craft here. This was photographed and filmed from a whole bunch of different people, and a lot of people saw this. The important thing is that very quickly you got a fake video that emulated this, but it was obviously faked with a still frame background and Caucasian people speaking English about what they were seeing and a cheesy light effect.
Now this is this is quite interesting because in Ireland we had a very good case involving a policeman and a triangular UFO, and it was very well researched by the very excellent, but it was very well researched by the very good Irish team, Dermot Butler and Carl Nally, I think. And the point about that is there was a very good fake on that released very soon afterwards, and their specific case was debunked very heavily. In fact, the fake pictures were actually associated immediately with the Irish case, and by definition the Irish case, by association the Irish case was then very heavily debunked. So this seems to be a case of COINTELPRO on all this?
I would say so, in that you may experience this phenomenon, but they're going to have an explanation that's going to make things easier on your belief system. So that's always key to watch out for, how the event is being spun by the media and how they interpret it and how they make everything okay and safe again.
That's part of the intelligence community maintaining balance, isn't it?
Maintaining the balance. Whereas, I don't know how many people saw that case in Jerusalem, or your case you just described, but all those voices become drowned out in a fake scenario, because it's sort of like neuro-linguistic programming. They create you see a video and you say, oh, that's fake, and then deep in your mind you've come up with the conclusions yourself. So they're giving you an easy way out of paradigm. Another good film is from the KGB, Russian KGB. That's their insignia, and they filmed a crash. There's gray people here. This was from a long time ago. And I don't know if this is real or not, but here's our little guy.
Yeah.
Here's his handprint, and you can see he doesn't have an index finger. His ring finger is longer, and he has these three fingers like this. So when you start to see these physical people coming from these intelligence movies, you start to wonder, what is happening? You have definitely seen this one, the alien autopsy video.
Yeah, that was something that the original alien sort of autopsy I sussed out as video when it was first shown publicly by the British UFO Research Association, and it turned out the whole thing was a complete fraud and a fake, because the whole thing was we had sections of the film. Well, it was only leader to film from that era, and it wasn't an actual film itself. But that was later proved to be a fake. And the guy who spun that story made he managed to get his publicity for the fake, for the real thing, and then he got his publicity for the fake, and that was subsequently dramatized in how it was done up in a place in West London or East London somewhere.
So you have these red herrings everywhere, and I also found these photos, they look a little bit more realistic, of an autopsy going on. I don't know where these came from.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
There's another photo of Colonel Corso with a dead gray in a little cube box that we'll put on.
But these are all very distinctly humanoid, very human-looking beings. I mean,
Yeah.
are they relatives of ours, or did we develop these in the long-distant past?
That's a good question, because they could be living on Earth with us the whole time. They could be our ancestors, they could be all sorts of things that we don't know. They are on the Earth at the same time as humans have been.
Could you just finish that reply again, please? Because I think you were drowned out by that jet.
Yeah, I don't know what I said. Remind me.
God.
They could have been living on Earth the whole time.
Oh yeah,
These all those aliens you've shown there are remarkably humanoid and could be some kind of derivation of humans. Do you think we developed those a long time ago?
It's very possible that they could be developed from us, or we could be developed from them. The Atacomba humanoid, Dr. Greer's little guy, has some of the genetics of the local people of that area, and those genes are unique to that population group. So they could possibly be hybridized species. The thing is when you create a belief system that these guys are the aliens, then it's sort of a structure for it to all fit into almost. And
I mean, there's no evidence those are aliens. They just could be other beings on Earth that we haven't discovered yet.
They could just be other humans, just like us.
You did mention something about dimensions at the off-camera. What I mean about extra-dimensional beings?
Yeah, we were talking about the reptilian beings, and that I've only encountered them as being coming out of a human being, and you see it almost through the spiritual domain coming out of these people. And I'd say often doctors and lawyers and judges or politicians or kings and warlords. Anybody who has the opportunity to subtract pain and misery from people and gain a taste for that, a pleasure for this dark, I'd say maybe evil, because they're traumatizing people. They get a taste for that and they enjoy your suffering. That's when you start to see the reptilians coming out.
Now, when you mean, what do you see, what do you perceive when you see a reptilian coming out, unquote?
Yeah, you sense that there is something else controlling and operating this person and deriving emotional pleasure out of your physical or emotional anguish and turmoil. And when they are doing this to you, that's when they almost reveal themselves to you, when they're you could use the word feeding, but it's a energy feeding. And when you encounter these people and they're not feeding off of your misery, they are the nicest people ever, and they operate as beautiful people, like very kind, and they are very sociable and personable and very popular usually. So we have two sort of dynamics, these physical beings and the spiritual beings. And how do we make sense of all these beings? Well...
Yes, how do we make sense of all these beings? And you haven't mentioned raptor reptilians or jinn. What about
jinn? Yeah, we talked about
angels.
The angels and the jinn.
From
These are
ancient folklore.
Spiritual... when you encounter an entity, you would experience it through your belief system, through something that's consistent with almost your folklore. So it could be fairies or jinn or angels or demons. It makes sense within the context. That's how they'll appear to you, whatever makes the most sense. And so you have things like Enochian magic, which they were creating this language, or they were given this language actually, so that they can contact and channel these angels. And you also hear stories like in the CIA, they were using Enochian magicians to channel UFOs for them, because the CIA wanted practical ways to call these guys down.
I mean,
and
wasn't this done by the Germans?
Yeah.
The Thule Society?
They were using ritual magic and all sorts of stuff.
And also, really, because we're really coming to a close on this particular part,
perhaps there's a lot more DNA inside of us that isn't being activated, and through these metaphysical and psychic domains, you are activating parts of yourself that you might call alien, but I would say they're part of us. And I've heard rumors that there's been epigenetic changes over the past while. A lot more than what would be accounted for based on natural mutations.
How are they manifest, these particular changes, literally in the last minute or so of this?
I think there is a deep connection between what you are using as your belief system and how
you keep pointing toward the third eye.
Yeah, because this is the filter of allowing your consciousness to come through and manifest. So if you have a belief system that accommodates and allows for your DNA to evolve and for aliens to come down and be in contact with you, that maybe just is what will happen.
So in essence, by controlling or accessing our consciousness, we are being used to create the event.
Possibly.
The so-called alien invasion will be created by us.
Possibly we are the portal and the aliens are us. But their spirit and psychic may be extraterrestrial. It's hard to separate us from them almost. The lines are so blurred. It's hard to separate a physical being from a spiritual being. And that's how the definition wants it to be. As soon as you accept you're just a physical being, then all the abilities for you to evolve and to have all these abilities and to channel, I don't know, maybe they become like a fantasy or something.
But in essence, are you then saying that the whole thing is a fantasy?
I would say we are creating it to be real, and if you are imagining it in your mind's eye, potentially it is real, but it's not our standard definition of physical real.
So something is accessing our consciousness at the perception consciousness interface to create these beings, literally in the last minute.
I think that maybe so. I think what is DNA? DNA is just an informational code. If you channeled the code, you could create a clone that would be an alien physical being, and you could have an alien consciousness in there.
What do you mean by channeled?
Essentially, if you have connection with your consciousness to anybody in any civilization, you can create a little psychic telephone and channel in their DNA code, because they might want to come over here. So by channeling their DNA code, you could start to introduce that, and so their spirits would be more accommodable in these types of physical bodies.
Well, this is something which Barry King, on the very first basis thing, or his father dealt with, encountered with the Germans. They were trying to do something with strange-looking humans to make them interfaceable here, and literally this is the last minute of the second hour of this second major section of Basis 32.
Thank you very much.
Memory.